Sorry, folks, there we go. So, of course, when we get here, I'm thinking to myself, this is fantastic. We got the nice fall weather out here in BC with all the opportunity to taste and sample BC wines. And I've been here a few times before, and I always take the opportunity to do that whenever I'm in BC. But I always wanted to bring some home. And I'm sure a lot of you do too, but you know, how much wine are we actually allowed to bring home? And if you're like me, you might say, well, that's a good question. And the fact that it's a good question sort of tells you a lot about how rules surrounding the economy work here in Canada. So with 13 provinces and territories, plus the federal government, they all have various rules that govern what goes on in the economy in this country, and they're not always consistent from province to province. And in fact, there's been some academic research done by a number of folks who've suggested that it could be the impact of as much as 5% of the Canadian economy if they were able to remove all of those rules. So I'm at Statistics Canada, I'm a unit head there, and currently with the Centre for Special Business Projects in conjunction with the Privy Council Office, we're working on a project that is attempting to take a look at these issues and potentially address them. So what to do about them is something that the federal government is currently grappling with. The Government of Canada has said that we want to do whatever we can to reduce these barriers between provinces and territories. So they've invested $20 million in the Federal Action Plan to strengthen internal trade. And the goal of the action plan is to get rid of the laws and the regulations and that sort of thing that inhibit trade between Canadian provinces and territories. And part of that funding is to build the Canadian Internal Trade Data and Information Hub. So that's the arm of the project that my team is leading. And when we release it, which is going to be next spring, the hub is designed for use by policymakers and researchers who want to ground their analysis in data. But why a hub? Well, first of all, good evidence-based decisions rely on having good data. And right now in Canada, the data on internal trade are siloed. It's housed in a number of different places, mostly in Statistics Canada that we're finding, but in different divisions within Statistics Canada. Provincial governments, they're the ones that have all the best data on areas of the economy that are governed by those different provincial laws. So think healthcare, education, natural resources. Provinces is where the best data on those parts of the economy reside. Now, StatCan, and we've been a part of this conference for many years, we're committed to having open data, accessible data that can be used and harnessed in order to make these sorts of good decisions. You know, my division also is part of the work on the linkable open data environment, for example, that furthers the goals of open data. So it's part of our traditions, part of our mandate to make sure that open data is available to making these tough decisions. But why is a hub the answer? We know that we need this data, but why particularly is the hub the best thing that, that we can do? So the issue with a lot of the StatCan data and other economic data across the country is that when you grab two data sets, you're often comparing apples and oranges, right? The metadata can be all over the map. The concepts can be all over the map. One of the key examples, for example, is say a commodity, and I tell a story about motor vehicles. There are many different commodity classification systems in Canada. If you use one of them, you might have cars and pickup trucks in one category and SUVs in another. Whereas a different system might have cars and pickup trucks and SUVs all in the same one, another one might have something completely different. They have all sorts of these different sorts of classification systems in order to talk about the same concept. What we're trying to do with the hub is to make sure that the data that we have is consistent, It's coherent, it's interlinkable, it's interoperable, and allows data scientists to do what they do best, which is dig into the data, find the patterns, and display it in a way that policymakers can make a meaningful judgments on how we're going to be going forward with the various policies. So the Canadian Internal Trade and Data Information Hub is going to be that central location for policymakers, analysts, and academia to get information on economic activity that moves across provincial and territorial borders. And there's going to be three key elements to that. Two of them I'm going to touch on, and one of them my colleague Steve is going to walk us all through. So the first is topic pages that bring together data and information on key issues such as labor mobility, transportation, and goods and services. We're also going to have analysis and resources section in order to bring together things like studies and analysis and sort of non-data elements that would be helpful to understanding of the internal trade economy. And finally, an SDMX platform, which we're going to go into some detail in order to conduct some advanced analytics. But before we get to the advanced analytics, let me show you some of the basics. So this is the Canadian Internal Trade Data and Information Hub. You folks are getting a preview of it. We're just doing a soft launch of it right now. It won't be available to the public for another few months, but we wanted to show you folks what we're up to. The introductory page just gives you a little bit of background on what internal trade is all about. Then you're going to have this link to the interactive data platform that Steve is going to walk us through over the next little bit. And then, okay. Okay. Can I go back to that now?
Yes, you can.
It's okay.
Froze.
I'll just get to the good stuff. What's going on here?
Sorry. So we're going here? Or are we going?
We're going to the Safari.
Okay. Sorry. It's supposed to be, here, let me do.
Duplicate?
Oh, this is hard to. Never mind. How come it's not extending this way? There we go. There we go. So now you can go to Safari.
There you go.
Okay. There we go.
All right.
Okay. Good luck.
Okay. Okay. All right. So hopefully everyone can see that, including the folks online at home. So like I said, first just a little bit of background on internal trade, then the interactive data platform that Steve's going to walk us through. But what I want to show you is sort of the way that we're introducing the topic to folks, and that's in the browse by topic. So each of the topics that we have here is a place where data on internal trade or interprovincial trade components of that topic are demonstrated for you. So I'm going to take a look at transportation. And like I said, a warning, this is about 80% complete. We're not even at the beta version yet. This is advanced stuff. So if we take a look at, for example, the transportation page, all right. I don't know how that happened, but that's all right. Yeah, I'm frozen.
Oh, it opened up in
Another window. I didn't want it to open up in another window.
this one here.
No, one below. Yeah.
Let's see if
There we go. Okay. So the first thing that you'll see for each one of these topics is a data visualization, which is a basic depiction of the data that underlies one of the data tables that is in that particular topic area. So in this situation, we're taking a look at the origin and destination of goods that are transported by rail in Canada. And all of the data visualizations, and this one is one in particular, gives the users the opportunity just to play a little bit with the data to figure out what it is that they want. So if we, for example, decided, all right, we're going to get rid of everyone and just have BC, and we want to know wherever across Canada it goes, but we're going to select, for example, a different particular topic. There are typical, commodity that you could have in BC. So there's, copper ore and concentrates. And you'll see copper ore by rail, most of it's going to BC, but it can also be going to Manitoba, large chunks of it go all the way to Quebec. Or if you want to take a look at things over time, you can see years along the bottom and how much is transported from some of whatever provinces of origin you want to some of whatever destinations you want over the course of how many years that you want. So every one of our topic pages is going to start with this sort of information that allows you to go through and play with all of this. We've got stuff on labor mobility, for example. We're going to have stuff on goods and services from the supply use tables. You then also have the ability to tap into related products. Now we don't have, I did that again. So we, when you clicked on the related products tab, you're going to get, it worked that time. Here we go. You're going to get links basically to whatever specific products that we have. In this situation, it's not as well developed. We just have the data visualization and the access to that specific data table at StatCan. But we are adding, for example, studies that are being done by academia, studies that are being done by the federal government and the like in order to build all of these topic pages. But the big part of the hub and the reason why I think that this would be of interest to a lot of the data community is about this SDMX platform. So it's Statistical Data and Metadata Exchange. This is the first time that StatCan is going to be releasing a hub that is compliant with the SDMX ISO. It's something that's been going on in Europe for about 30 years. And I'm going to turn it over here to Steve, who can walk us through that, and I will go over and I'll run your slides for you, Steve.
Thank you, Jeff. Are you expecting me to run my own slideshow, or are you going to be still running the slideshow down there? I guess I will be sharing my screen there. Oh, okay, no, never mind. Okay. So if we go to slide 9, so I can introduce myself while we get to the correct slide. My name is Steve Armstrong. I work at Statistics Canada. I'm a unit head in the Center for Statistical and Data Standard, and I'm unit head for the SDMX unit. So I have a few words on SDMX today, not really technical, but just to give you an idea. So this is a first slide I'm going to present it. Nice slide we like to start with when we talk about SDMX. So here, what you see on the screen is a figure, a number. So, and if I could ask you what this number means. I mean, it's 2529, 2,529. So, I mean, it can be anything you want, or it can absolutely be not what it is exactly, because figures by themselves are meaningless. So that's pretty much what a statistical table is a set of observation or measure, but by themselves, they mean nothing. So whoever, I think it's Jeff, you have control. Just keep clicking. I mean, there's animation here. So you're going to see as we go, we start getting a little bit more information. So we start by realizing that this is actually a number. It's a number of touristic establishment. It's not any type of touristic establishment. So we're talking a campsite. It's for the year 2004. We have the geography here. And now that we get more information, stop here, please. Yeah. So we can make sense of the figures because we were provided with the proper metadata, such as touristic establishment, the country, the frequency, the time, etc. So, and that's what SDMX allows. You can click another time. So SDMX allows to develop the data model that would provide the descriptions for all relevant characteristics of the data to be exchanged. So if we move to the next slide. Data Hub using SDMX. So SDMX is, as Jeff mentioned, it stands for Statistical Data and Metadata Exchange. It's an ISO standard, which is designed to describe statistical data and metadata, normalize the exchange of the data, and improve the efficiency of their sharing across statistical organization. SDMX initiative did produce a number of guidelines that come with recommended practices for creating interoperable data and metadata set. And the focus is being on harmonization of the data. So by harmonizing specific concepts and terminology, the organizations, they can achieve an even more efficient exchange of comparable data and metadata, and therefore fully benefits from the use of SDMX. The reason for using SDMX, or the different use cases for SDMX, at the start when it was created, SDMX, the standard, it was 20 years ago, about 20 years ago. The seven SDMX sponsor organization, which are big players that are the main players at world and regional levels in the collection of official statistics in a large variety of domains. So I'm talking the IMF, the OECD, the Bank for International Settlements. I guess they had enough of collecting data in different formats, different file format, different structures. So they came up with the idea of a standard to make easier the exchange of metadata. So that's the first use case. That's the first reason for using SDMX. That's what it was intended for at the beginning, for data and metadata reporting. But over the years, it evolved, and now the tools, I mean, there's another use case that is data discovery and visualization that is specifically interesting for when we're talking Data Hub. So that's what we're using SDMX specifically for when we talk a Data Hub. So that's the use case we're interested in. So if we move to the next slide, I was talking about harmonization. Here you can see that, and I'm going to talk about the concept of cross-domain concepts and code lists. So let's say here we have two domains. So let's say domain number one is health domain, and the other one is education or agriculture. Doesn't really matter. So each of these domain producing statistics, they have a set of use concepts. So they use concept specific, for their own domain. But there are an intersection, and there are some domains, and here there are only two domains, but there would need to be multiple domains. And we have multiple domains using concepts. They are shared among relevant statistical domains. So we're talking here like the FREC concept, which is frequency, area for the geography. So these are the cross-domain concepts. And the statistical working group at SDMX, I mean, they are in charge of coming up with these cross-domain concepts. If we move to the next slide, I have a few examples of these cross-domain concepts that are shared among statistical domains. Next slide, please. So we see that some of the widely used cross-domain concepts, we talk about frequency, indicator, ref area, sex, age, things like that. And most of these cross-domain concepts, sorry, I'm just moving on my notes as well to make sure. But by harmonizing, using the same concept making use of the cross-domain concept is not enough. The harmonization needs to take place it needs to go beyond that. So we need to harmonize the way concepts are represented, and this is being done through the code list. Good news, most cross-domain concepts come with a cross-domain code list. Frequency, for example, SDMX has produced and is maintaining a code list for frequency. The not so good news is that it's not the case for all cross-domain concepts, like reference area, or the recommended cross-domain code list doesn't really fit our need. So, and for example, just before we go to the next slide, so let me just talk quickly about code lists. I guess, like I was saying, this is where the harmonization needs to take place at the code list level to make the content, the data fully interoperable and comparable across different data sets. So that's where the harmonization needs to take place, like it being said in the first bullet. And definition of a code list. So code lists are a list of valid codes or values for the different concepts that we're going to be using. It basically enumerates all permissible values in terms of codes. And these are essential for interpreting the data and validating the data. Interpretation, sorry, yeah. So if we move to the next slide, I'm going to use a specific concept. We're going to talk about geography, which is really easy for people to understand. So we have many coding systems exist for Canadian provinces and territories, but each of them may have a slightly different scope from one to another. And there are gaps and sometimes even conflicts when we want to exist the prescribed code list, when we come up with a code list that's going to fit our own need. So if we move to the next slide, so I'm just going to explain here. It's a big table, so it might be small. So on the left column, these are pretty much the different items that we need to fully cover from the geographical perspective, what we need to cover with the different tables that we need to be working with for the data hub, the CITH data hub. So we need from at the national level, we need sometimes data being disseminated that Canadian or for Canada, sometimes at the geographical regions, Atlantic, the prairies, territories, and sometimes at the province or territories. The second column is what is prescribed right now. This is the data reference standard on Canadian provinces and territories, which came into effect really recently on October 2nd. So it's intended to standardize the way Canadian provinces and territories are described in data set for data interoperability and improved data quality. It is to be implemented. So that's what we should be using. But now if we look at this data set, this code list, I can see that first, it doesn't cover everything that we need, all of the scenarios that we need. We disseminate data at Canadian level. There's no code at this point, and it only has codes for provinces and territories. There's nothing for the geographical regions. So and plus some of these codes, they come in conflict. If we also in our code sets, if we have codes for at the word level, so NL for Newfoundland comes in conflict with the ISO 316 code for Netherlands. Same for Prince Edward Island. Peru uses PE, and same for Saskatchewan and Slovakia. So I won't go through the list, but there are conflicts as well. And then if we use the ISO 3166. But if we were to use this one, we have nothing for the geographical regions, which we have for from the SGC, which is the second last column, which is stands for the standard geographical classification, which is from StatCan. So all of this to say that many code systems can exist, and even using the prescribed one sometimes doesn't work. So just to show that our harmonization effort to be sure we cover everything and everyone is using the same code list or the same codes. That's the last column. So what we needed to use a combination. The end result is a combination of codes taken from these three code lists. So then we can cover Canada, we can cover the geographical region of Canada, and we decided to use the ISO 3166 codes for the province territories, which is somewhat aligned with what is prescribed from the data reference standard on Canadian provinces and territories. But we decided to use the CA-NL or CA- and the alpha code for provinces and territories. So that way, because this is only a subset here, what you see, because we also need the codes for countries. So we have Slovakia, sorry, we have Peru and stuff like that. So that way, we don't see any conflict in our code list. So that's one of the things that we needed to do. Like I was talking, frequency is pretty easy. I mean, there's a code list that we can use. This one, we need to work a little bit more to make sure that it's comparable across all the data sets. Next slide is my last slide, but I mean, harmonization brings its load of challenges. And here, just for product, and it's a bit like, I'm not going to go too long on this slide, but like Jeff was explaining with his example about the automotive industry or the motor vehicle, as far as one classification system, maybe for car and pickup trucks or SUVs in the same category, as opposed to another classification system might be split in two different, using two different codes. Here I just have an example of the different classification system or code system that you can find for a concept, for the product concept or commodity. So you have these different NAPs and supply and use product classification. The first three are in bold just to show that with the tables that we're working right now, different tables are using the product concept, and these three different classification systems are being used depending of which table you're talking about. So it makes it bring it is a lot of challenges, because there's not always a one-to-one. It's not always easy to do harmonization across, and it's something that we need to face. So I guess that's what I had about the work we do with SDMX and what it requires from us to be able to feed and be feed properly the hub with harmonized data so that the user can compare, have a base to be able to compare different data sets coming from different sources. So back to you, Jeff.
Thanks very much, Steve. So this could get to be pretty difficult. One of the things that we found at Stats and in going through all of these is that each individual statistical program made decisions about its metadata, about its classifications, about products, and all these sorts of things in order to give very deep and nuanced and specific data to the Canadian public. Well, when you target that nuance and make sure that it's crystal clear and down to the nth degree, then it makes it tough to compare from one data set to another, right? So what our project is intending on doing is to create a version of the data that's A, correct, but B, comparable, which is a little bit different than some of the other stuff that StatCan has right now. This, or the last slide here about products, this is the big challenge that's going to be years away before we can figure out how to do this one properly, because there are literally thousands and thousands of these codes spread across all sorts of different things that that we use. But we're starting with this hub, which should have the vast majority of the metadata standardized so you can build those complex models. And as soon as, and the good thing about SDMX is that as soon as you have a table that is compliant with the ISO, you don't have to do it again. Right? So as long as that program continues, it doesn't matter what data hub or what topic it is. Like GDP data sets could be used in all sorts of different things in both social and economic data. Well, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So where are we now? Well, we're actually now a lot less than 1 year to launch because the Privy Council office decided that we're going to launch this earlier after I wrote this slide. So we're going to be focusing on launching this to the public by April of 2024. The beta version we launched basically this week, sort of a quiet launch. Now StatCan and PCO are able to use the data going back and forth. And the focus for the next year is data ingestion. How do we grow this data hub in order to make it increasingly useful for the Canadian public, for data scientists, for policymakers? So we're looking at developing new data sets on things like labor mobility, manufacturing, wholesale trade. I mean, labor mobility is of key importance to the federal government right now, and my colleague is actually a labor economist by training. He's doing a lot of work. I've got a background in manufacturing and wholesale trade statistics. So those annual surveys ask questions about destination of sales. So we're applying the answers to our surveys, applying those answers maybe to the monthly survey to get a much more granular and more up-to-date information on internal trade or interprovincial trade. And we're going to be working with provincial and territorial governments to include their data in the hub, which means identification, ingestion, conversion to an SDMX ISO compliant standard so that, again, it can all be used. But can folks in this room help? And I think yes, in a number of different ways, but the big thing that we are doing right now is we're hunting for open data. We are looking for anyone who has data that measures economic activity that goes across provincial and territorial boundaries. So I noticed that there was Hydro-Quebec is one of the presenters this week. I'm sure that they have data about electricity that's generated in Quebec and being sold to other provinces that would be of great interest to us. But if any of you are working with non-StatCan data sets that have this sort of information, that would be something that is of great interest to us. So all of that to take 35 minutes to get to the final reason why you're here, which is how much wine can I bring home? And I wasn't going to leave you hanging, as much as you might have thought of it. But this is a demonstration of the problem that we're trying to solve, and that not everyone has the same rules. So if you're going to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or Ontario, you can bring whatever you want. It's unlimited. In Quebec, you can bring one case. New Brunswick has absolutely the best rule. You can bring one bottle, and it has absolutely no limit on the size of that bottle. That's the way the regulations work. So you can bring whatever you want. It's 2 cases for Newfoundland and Labrador, and 1 case for PEI and each of the territories. So hopefully they will eventually be, well, BC, you're in BC. So if you're in BC to BC, you don't actually have to worry about it, right? So you're not, see, it's only if you cross a provincial border that my program really cares. So if you're not crossing provincial border, I didn't research it. So, but so yeah, so that's what we're up to. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that having been to this conference last year, this year as well, there's always talk about StatCan and how we do this and how we do that. I've been with Stats for about 12 years. More than happy to answer questions about this presentation. Steve can answer stuff about some of the methodology, or if there's anything else about StatCan, concerns, comments, suggestions, questions, I'm more than happy to either to attempt to tackle them here, and I can for certain guide you to the right folks back in Ottawa. So with that, thanks so very much.
Did you have a question? So I just want to clarify, when you launch in April with your MVP, that is only StatCan data that you've put into this standard. That's correct?
That's right. So we're
Okay.
going to have, I believe it's 24 StatCan data sets that are going to be there. And we are working with a couple of provinces and territories with some initial data that they want to include. I think procurement data might be first, but really the fiscal year 2024 to 2025, that's when we're really focusing on ingestion and gathering that data over the course of, or gathering that data from other sources.
And then I'm assuming the challenge then becomes when you start going out to the provinces, and we all have our data in 100 different formats, and
Yep.
none of it is classified following the standard. Not only do you need to bring it in and scrub it and make sure that it is interoperable and it's following your standard, but then you actually have to convince us all that when we're updating it, that we actually update it at the source so that it's feeding in the format that you need as well. So it's actually trying to implement the standard is the only way that this is going to be an effective long-term solution to have the hub run.
That's it exactly, and that's something that Steve is an expert in. But because like what we can do is that we can actually, and I'm going to speak for Steve and step all over him, but Steve gives courses on how to do this. Steve, and that's training that StatCan can potentially work with provincial governments in order to actually do that, so that folks can organize their data in a specific way. We have a small team, but we can certainly try to ingest data. It's something that we're quite familiar with at StatCan, but it takes some work, and we're very much looking for provincial and territorial partners, and even private sector partners if they're willing to partner with us in order to build this as time goes along.
So are you considering a service model then where you would offer that initial transition to standardize to the province or territory to get us set up? And then once we've set it up, obviously you get value out of having it in the hub, but we get value out of knowing that ours is standardized if we want to share elsewhere in the same format?
I mean,
Sorry, hard questions.
That is so far above my pay grade, first of all. I don't have the ability to say that, but we are very much open-minded. This is I've talked to, Steve's bosses a lot, and, we are very interested in finding a way to do this in a comprehensive fashion. And if we need to give some support to provinces and territories, let's have that conversation. Let's figure out how we can do that, who pays for it, the time, and that sort of thing. We know that we have people who can do the teaching. It's just a case of figuring out how the best way to do it is. But it's conversations we absolutely want to have.
We have an online question from Siobhan Lyons from the government of Nova Scotia. Will the data also be downloadable by the public for use under an open license?
Sorry, would the hub be downloadable by the public?
Will the data be available
Yes.
under an open license?
So, so it's all of Stat Canada published data is always open to all Canadians free of charge at all times. So the data underlying the topic pages that I sent you, it's all directly linked to our corridor tables, which you can all download, as well the SDMX hub. You can work directly in that hub. You can use any programming language in order to build whatever information, whatever data sets that you want, and then download those data sets as you need them. And that's the whole goal, is to make this a tool that Canadians can use in order to tackle these issues. So yeah, it'll be all available, it'll all be free.
Hi, Jeff. Thanks for your presentation. I work for TBS on the Open Government team, and building on the previous question, so not just making it available openly and freely, but specifically under an open license, how does this connect back to the Open Government portal?
To be honest, that's something that I don't know, and maybe that's a conversation that we should have. I'm sorry to be not an expert in that field, but I know what the intent is, right? And the intent is to get this into as many people's hands as possible, particularly the decision makers at the provincial level, who are being asked by the Privy Council Office and the federal government to get rid of these trade barriers inside of Canada. Right? And so the people that are working on these issues are going to have that access, and StatCan always makes all of its data public. So in whatever, it would be no different than any other Statistics Canada data set that you would get access to. I think that's probably the easiest way to describe it.
Do we have any other questions, Drew?
Thanks. So I guess, seeing as this is a project to support policy, the policy officers, would they be looking at things like rules as code so that they can simulate changes to their code and programmatically simulate the data that might change based on economic assumptions?
Yeah, so what we anticipate is that folks are going to take the data from this hub, and they're going to build the economic models that are required in order to make the policy analysis that they want to do. And whether they do that through some sort of simulation or some sort of building of a model where they can change whichever variable or change whichever assumptions that are associated to that, that's going to be up to them. As I sort of indicated at the beginning, there are 5 prongs to this $21 million approach from the federal government, and we're kind of the thin edge of the wedge. You need to have the data available to you before you can start to build those models. So StatCan doesn't usually build those models except, some stuff from GDP and the accounts, but generally speaking, we don't build those models at StatCan. We provide the data that underlies and generates the ability of other government agencies or federal government departments, provincial governments to go ahead and build those economic models. So the goal here is to make sure that they have the best data in order to do that, and that it's clean, and that you can use it in a way that's a lot easier to connect than it has been in the past.